lot worse.
Do you mind giving me an example of some of those things?
Well, absolutely. Okay. A lot of Christians will really get mad at someone who claims to be a homosexual.
Sure.
Okay. And they'll point the finger and they'll wag their tongue. Okay. But do you know in Proverbs chapter 6, it says there's 6 things the Lord hates and 7 are an abomination, and homosexuality isn't even the top 10. The number 1 is a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, those that sow discord. Well, what do you see within the church? You see a lot of people with proud looks, a lot of people with lying tongues, a lot of people that sow discord among the brethren, and those are all called abominations. And yet they will pick and choose which abomination they favor over another abomination. And this abomination is okay, but that abomination is not okay.
Now, what is meant by proud looks? You mentioned that was
someone who is arrogant,
okay.
Someone who thinks they're better than everyone else. You know, they look down upon the poor, or they look down upon the homeless, or they look down upon anybody. And I judge absolutely nobody because I'm not anybody's judge. My goal is to get people to fall in love with their dad, the real dad, the creator. And those who have run away, I want them to go back home.
And I love that perspective of it, because you mentioned that you're not the judge, but a lot of the religious people that I've encountered throughout my life, and this is not true of all Christians or all people of any religion, but a lot of them are very judgmental. And we see this a lot today. Obviously, like I'm a trans person, and this is a big issue with a lot of them now, more so than ever. And like, even if they believe everything that they're saying that they believe, it doesn't impact them whatsoever, and it certainly doesn't fulfill any of the teachings that they're supposed to live their lives by treating people so disrespectfully and with such anger and animosity, right? The instruction was to love your neighbor as yourself, not unless they were a man wearing a dress, right? And I feel like a lot of that gets lost, in addition to just not having the sense of humor that is so important to me and that I think should be so critical to people's lives. They don't allow themselves to laugh because they're too busy judging the actions of other people and worrying about the actions of those people, and not just existing in the moment and loving themselves and one another. And that's heartbreaking, because it is so much easier to love one another and to hope for the best for one another than it is to say, that person, he didn't get the right paperwork when he came to the United States. He's a terrible person. And it's so much easier to say, hey, I love you, brother. But they struggle with that.
How can I help?
Right. So I'm glad to hear that there is a take on Christianity, I suppose. Now, I keep calling you a Christian, and like you have specifically said that that's not accurate. But in the early days of Christianity, if I remember correctly, they did simply refer to themselves as Jews as well. Like the word Christian didn't exist.
Exactly.
So when you say that you're a Jew, it is because you abide the teachings of the Torah, presumably, and you recognize that Jesus is the Messiah. And that
okay, well, there's a difference between Jewish genealogy and Jewish beliefs.
okay.
I mean, there's a lot of present-day Jews that don't follow Judaism at all. They're more communists, atheists. Okay, so you have to separate between the people and the belief. Now, physically, I'm Jewish on my father's side, but as far as a belief goes, it's a homogenized blend of Judaism and Christianity, where I do believe that Yeshua is the Messiah, but he's Jewish.
Okay. So how much of no that's a loaded question. I was going to ask how much of your
you can ask me any loaded question.
It's an impossible to answer question. I was going to ask how much of your religious beliefs would you say are typical of Christianity and how much would be typical of Judaism, but like that, what do I expect you to say? 30% Judaism, 70% Christianity, or some nonsense like that? I'm just fascinated by my understanding of Judaism is that it accepts that Jesus may have been a prophet, but not the Son of God, not the Messiah. Whereas you are coming along and saying that you do believe that Jesus is the Messiah. So it's a branch or denomination of Judaism that I'm not familiar with, but do you consider yourself to be a denomination of Judaism?
There is, let me put it this way. There is a denomination, a sect of Judaism called Messianic Judaism. These are for Jewish native people who now believe that Jesus is their Messiah. Okay. They don't consider me Jewish because I'm not Jewish on my mother's side. I'm Jewish on my father's side. But they used to be the father's side, but then they changed it to the mother's side, okay, for different reasons I won't get into right now. But for me, I call myself biblical. That's what I say. I'm not really Jewish or Christian. I'm biblical, and I follow the biblical holidays that the Jews follow. I don't follow all of their traditions, I don't know if you knew this, but in Judaism, there's denominations. There's the Reformed, there's Conservative, there's Orthodox, there's Ultra-Orthodox, and they completely disagree with each other, as much as you get a Baptist and a Pentecostal. And so when you talk about Jewish belief, I even have to break it down into which denomination of Judaism.
Okay, that's a really excellent point. And I suppose it's always worth pointing out when I say Judaism, whether I mean ethnically or religiously. And I suppose my question would have been, religiously, would you consider yourself religiously to be a denomination of Judaism? Because your ethnicity, that's a fascinating topic, and it informs a person's behavior and traditions and social networks and everything else, but it doesn't necessarily define their views on the world as a whole. So I guess my question was, religiously, I guess in the overall scheme of things, yes, Christianity itself is a denomination of Judaism. How could it not be? But so I guess my question is really just kind of irrelevant, because as I just said, Christianity itself is by definition a denomination of Judaism. And where you fall on that is just a label that ultimately is meaningless, I guess. Some people are Baptists, some are Methodists, and those labels are very significant to them. And I'm not going to say that, obviously those labels distinguish them from other denominations of that, but it doesn't really tell you much about who they are and what they believe and what they want to see in the world.
I love that. Now, I'm going to ask you a trick question here.
Awesome.
And, okay. Do you have a soul?
Okay. Do I have a part of me that lives beyond my physical form, I guess?
Okay.
Is that the question?
Well, here's the thing is.
I guess my question is, what do you mean by soul?
Well, first off, you don't have a soul. You are a soul who has a body. Okay. See, we always think of the flesh. I'm a human being and I have a soul. No. You are a soul. You just happen to have a body, and you're going to get a new one later on. And so when people say, the problem with self-identity, let's say they're a plumber, and then all of a sudden they retire, and now they go, who am I? I'm not a plumber. But they've always identified themselves as a plumber. Okay, but all of a sudden now he's not a plumber. He loses his identity. He never was a plumber. He was a soul who did plumbing. And so we have to separate who we are from what we do. Even if you're a teacher, but you're no longer a teacher, that doesn't mean your identity's gone. Okay. Even parents, when the kids move out of the house, they go, who am I now? I don't have any kids in the house, and they end up getting separated or whatever. Too many people try to find identity by what they do. It's not what you do. You're not a human doing. You're a human being, and you are a soul, and you have a body.
I like that perspective. I don't know that I agree, because I don't know that I believe any part of me exists independently of my body, but that's my own personal belief, and I'm just unconvinced on the subject. But regardless, if human beings and souls are both things that exist, I suppose is how I would want to phrase that, then I like the idea that you are a soul that happens to have a body a lot more than I like the idea that you're a body that happens to have a soul.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So I really like that phrasing of it. And I really like the idea of like God having a sense of humor. That to me is one of the most important parts of anyone's worldview. If the creator of your universe isn't laughing, then how can you find joy if the person that created the entire universe isn't? And that always scares me. And I feel like it leads to a lot of hardship in the world that isn't necessary. If everyone would just chill out and relax and laugh a little bit, I think the world might be a better place.
Yeah. In one sense, I've almost died so many times I've lost count. I've had guns at my head several times. I was almost eaten by lions in Africa. I've had major medical malpractice, major car accidents, armed robberies. And I really believe if it's not my time, it's not going to happen. And if it is my time, there's nothing I can do about it. So I have no fear of death. I see death more or less as changing clothes or changing bodies. I'm going to keep going. And so for me, I have a really unique relationship with God or the creator. I don't even like the word God, but it's very personal. It's not religious at all. It's personal. He saved me so many times. I can't help but like him.
Which is a beautiful sentiment. And I wish that more people would agree with that view of things and would view the creator or God, as you will, as someone that they want to be friends with, right? The God that these people worship is not the kind of person that they would want to go have a drink with at a bar. And that to me is weird when in their worldview, they want to spend all of eternity with this person, but it's also not the kind of person that they would choose to spend any time with whatsoever. And I don't know how they manage to reconcile all of those things. Like the God that I want to worship is someone that, I'd go and have a drink with, right? We'd have some laughs, have some fun. That's what I would like to believe in.
I understand. Yeah, I think here's the thing, and I don't know in your family, everyone's family is different. Some people, has there ever been anyone that you really respected?
In my family?
Or anyone in the world?
Absolutely then.
Okay, now, with that being the situation, there's things you wouldn't do that you would do with Joe Friend just because you respect the relationship. Well, it's the same thing with God. We can have good times, we can have fun times, but we also have to realize and have great respect. But you can have a lot of fun and have great respect.
Sure. It's definitely worth pointing that out. Like this person that we're talking about is the creator of the universe, right? And that it's like being friends with your boss, I suppose. And
exactly. Because I worked for a couple. He was